following is CNN's coverage of a live event.
Hello, I'm Miles O'Brien, reporting live from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. We are about 6 minutes away from the scheduled launch of the Space Shuttle Columbia, and a little bit of space history. The person who is commanding this mission is what is significant about this one, 42-year-old Air Force Colonel Eileen Collins, the first female commander of a U.S. space mission, leading this mission on a 5-person crew to deliver a $1.5 billion X-ray telescope into orbit. Now, 24 hours ago, this was the scene here at the Kennedy Space Center. Lightning and thunder passed through the area all throughout the launch window, forcing NASA to scrub its efforts to launch 24 hours ago. And 72 hours ago, on the first attempt to launch Columbia and its payload and its 5-person crew, this was the scene.
Cutoff is given.
A cutoff given at 7 seconds into the countdown when a sensor erroneously detected a hydrogen link in the engine compartment of the space shuttle. Turns out that sensor was bad. That problem has since been fixed, and the launch controllers here feel that the systems on the orbiter are now fully go for launch. We're going to have a special feature for you tonight, which we'd like to show you a little bit about. The United Space Alliance, which is the private contractor which runs the space shuttle operations here at the Kennedy Space Center, will be providing us real live telemetry from the shuttle. If you look in the lower 30 of your screen, you'll be able to follow the shuttle's velocity, its altitude, as well as its roll, yaw, and pitch. So watch for that during the launch. It'll be about a 6-second delay behind what is actually happening, but it'll give you a good idea of the kind of speed that the shuttle is dealing with as it launches off this pad 39B here at the Kennedy Space Center. We are 4 minutes away from launch right now, and just to give you an idea of what is going on right now, in just a few moments we're going to be watching as the shuttle goes through a pre-programmed test of the flight control systems.
And is initiating drain back.
That's the voice of Lisa Malone of NASA, who is sitting in the Launch Control Center,
and counting.
just a few hundred yards from where I sit.
Final purge of the main engines is now starting. The main engine valves are being opened and being prepared for start.
She's referring to valves which carry the liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen in that huge external tank, 500,000 gallons of it.
The surfaces has started. The orbiter flight control surfaces are being moved through a pre-programmed pattern to verify they are ready for launch. And the 3 main engines will be gimbaled and positioned for launch.
When we say gimbal, you'll see those cones eventually moving around into various places to make sure they're moving freely. Once that is completed, they will be left in the position.
All systems are go for launch at this time.
You see them moving right now.
The 26th flight of the shuttle Columbia with a crew of 5.
It's the 95th flight of the space shuttle program, which began in 1981 with Columbia, April of 1981 to be exact. But the first with a female as commander.
3 minutes and counting.
At this juncture, the shuttle is now on its internal power. The ground power is disconnected, a significant milestone as we march toward a launch of the space shuttle.
The liquid oxygen tank is being pressurized for flight.
Another significant moment.
The gaseous oxygen vent hood retraction is now beginning.
You're looking now at a close-up at the top of the shuttle's external tank. That hood receives gases, liquid oxygen, as they vent off from that shuttle's external tank. It is there to ensure that ice does not form all over that external tank. That vent hood, as you can see there, has 2 vacuum tunnels there which suck in the oxygen as it boils off.
Memory is cleared, no unexpected errors. Copy that.
And as you see it pivot out of the way.
Advisors, initiate O2 flow. A few days delayed, but same enthusiastic launch team wishing Columbia's crew success on your mission.
1 minute.
CDR, we've got our visors and our O2. Thanks for all the great work, and we'll see you in 5 days.
Commander Eileen Collins, obviously ready to go. This mission has been delayed by almost a year now. Problems with the payload primarily. The Chandra X-ray telescope.
Columbia continuing to look very clean. 90 seconds away from launch.
Difficulties with the payload itself as well.
Of NASA's series of great observatories following the Hubble Space Telescope and the Compton Gamma Ray Observatory.
Also some problems with the booster motor, which is designed to put it in a much higher orbit than the space shuttle.
Liquid hydrogen tank being pressurized for flight.
500,000 gallons of liquid hydrogen and oxygen inside that burnt orange external tank, feeding those three main engines, which you see on a close-up there.
1 minute and counting.
The two white
Columbia
solid...
will be launched on an easterly trajectory on a 28.45 degrees inclination to the equator.
There's two white solid rocket boosters to the side there. Do most of the work getting the space shuttle into orbit. The orange tank feeding those main engines.
95th space shuttle launch. T-minus 35 seconds. T-minus 30 seconds.
25 seconds.
T-minus 20 seconds. T-minus 15. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. We have a go for engine start, 0. We have booster ignition and liftoff of Columbia, reaching new heights for women in X-ray astronomy.
Houston, Columbia is in the roll. We've got a fuel cell pH number 1.
Roger, roll, Columbia, we're looking at. Columbia, Houston, we'd like AC bus sensors off. We're evaluating the fuel cell. Columbia.
That's complete, Scooter.
Roger that, Columbia. Looks like we had a transient on AC1.
Columbia is now headed downrange, altitude 3.8 miles. And as we hear, all systems okay. It looks like a sensor on board. 3 engines throttling down, all at 67%.
Columbia, Houston, we are critical to AC2 on the center engine, AC3 on the right. We've lost DCU-A on the center and DCU-B on the right.
Copy that.
And Columbia, Houston, you are go at throttle up.
Columbia, go at throttle up.
And all 3 engines are back at full throttle. Columbia is now 8 miles downrange, altitude 14 miles. The flight control team is monitoring the electrical systems on board. Again, all 3 fuel cells appear to be healthy, as do the hydraulic systems. We're approaching 1 minute 50 seconds into the flight, standing by for burnout and separation of the solid rocket boosters on the orbiter. Columbia now has burned more than 2 million pounds of fuel and weighs half of what it did at launch. SRB separation is confirmed.
You're listening to the voice of Kyle Herring at Mission Control.
Performance nominal.
Performance nominal.
That report, the performance thus far in the launch phase has been as expected. Again, the electrical systems officer here in Mission Control reports that all electrical systems are in good shape. Columbia is now 50 miles away from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 40 miles, now traveling 3,200 miles per hour.
Voice of Kyle Herring, those
Approaching
numbers.
3 minutes into the flight. The next call will be shortly after 3 minutes, which will be a 2-engine call for the transatlantic abort site at Ben Guerir in Morocco. Again, all systems healthy, the hydraulic systems, electrical systems, and the 3 engines are all at full throttle. No issues that are being tracked. Again, all electrical systems are healthy aboard the orbiter.
As we listen to the voice of Kyle Herring, apparently there was some sort of indication that Eileen Collins called out shortly after liftoff, which indicated...
Columbia can reach Ben Guerir now in the event of a single engine failure. Again, all 3 are still at full throttle, and there are no issues being reported by the flight control team. All is quiet. It appears that the electrical issue earlier on appears to have been a sensor. All systems are again healthy. Columbia is 116 miles away from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 58 miles. Traveling now almost 4,500 miles per hour.
Now, those fuel cells are critical because the fuel cells are what operate the hydraulic systems on the space shuttle. The flight control systems are run by hydraulics.
Columbia, negative return.
Columbia can no longer return to the Kennedy Space Center now in the event of an engine failure, but all three, again, are doing very well.
So apparently what Eileen Collins had on the first few moments of her ride into space as commander was essentially a bit of a scare with a sensor, indicating there might have been a problem with the fuel cell, which are the power-producing devices which run the auxiliary power units on the shuttle, which run the hydraulic system.
Operator system operating normally now. 4 minutes, 45 seconds into the flight. Columbia is 199 miles away from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 67 miles, traveling 6,000 miles per hour.
And at that point, with Columbia 67 miles high and 7,000 miles an hour in all of 4 minutes and 58 seconds, let's take a look back at that launch. It was a beautiful sight indeed.
T-minus 15, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. We have a go for engine start, 0. We have booster ignition and liftoff of Columbia, reaching new heights for women in X-ray astronomy.
Columbia is in the roll. We've got a fuel cell pH number 1.
Roger, roll, Columbia. We're looking at.
And there you heard the call from Eileen Collins indicating she had a problem with her fuel cell. Those fuel cells are critical. Anybody who remembers the story of Apollo 13 knows a little something about fuel cells. Essentially what they do is convert liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, create an electrical charge, create power. A byproduct of that particular reaction is water. There's some redundancy in that fuel cell system, but it is obviously a very critical system on board the space shuttle for running the hydraulics in turn running the flight surfaces which allow Columbia to fly through the atmosphere. Those hydraulics not as critical, of course, once on orbit, when they're not using those flight surfaces, those aerodynamic surfaces.
Center engine, AC3 on the right.
Watching this replay, you can't help but be struck by the acceleration and speed which is attained in such short period of time there. Already at 10 miles altitude, 52,000 feet, traveling 2,100 miles an hour.
Three engines are back at full throttle.
Throttle up is the moment when the shuttle goes through its maximum aerodynamic pressure. The throttles are reduced through that period of time. Once the shuttle gets into the higher atmosphere, where the atmosphere is thinner, the engines are boosted back up to 104% of their capacity, which takes them on their way to orbit.
Solid rocket boosters on the orbiter. Columbia now has burned more than 2 million pounds of fuel and weighs half of what it did at launch.
And the solid rocket booster separation, which of course is a very critical moment in any shuttle launch. Right now we are 7 minutes and 34 seconds into this flight. The main engines on the Space Shuttle Columbia are still firing, but they have fired successfully and fired well, and no matter what happens, even if they were to lose an engine right now, they would be able to attain an orbit. So the crew of 5 with Eileen Collins aboard, the first woman commander of a U.S. space mission, on their way to orbit right now, on their way to a page in space history. And 7 hours and 17 minutes from now, they will have done their major task, or at least begun the major part of their task, which is to deploy a $1.5 billion X-ray telescope, the most powerful X-ray telescope in the world, the Chandra X-ray telescope. It's sort of analogous to the Hubble Space Telescope. We, of course, will be watching it all throughout the night as Columbia continues its mission and as it continues toward main engine shutoff, which should come in just a few moments. Miles O'Brien, CNN, reporting live at the Kennedy Space Center.
This has been a CNN Live event.
Contact and capture.